Hello and welcome. The world is in the midst of a spate of growing violence that we hope is not destined to change the way we live. Terrorism being delivered at the hands of a brutal regime in parts of Syria and Iraq that claims to have divine sanction. While the world comes to terms with the Paris attacks and Mali, we look at this phenomenon of radicalization. We'll give you a glimpse of what's happening across the world, pausing to take in unique stories like the desire for a new flag in New Zealand and Brazil's success in bringing down greenhouse gas emissions. This is World Connect, your window to the world, a global picture of our times. Let's set the ball rolling with the focus of the show. French Parliament approves 3-month state of emergency. EU imposes stricter border checks. Paris attacks mastermind Abaoud killed in a raid on a Saint-Denis apartment. French and Russian fighter jets pound ISIS stronghold Raqqa. France says it's at war. Former French colony Mali also declares 10-day state of emergency after jihadis attack a hotel in capital Bamako, taking 170 people hostage. Armed forces eliminate the attackers, at least 21 people killed. New Zealand looks to re-establish identity with a new flag, holding a referendum on a possible replacement for the national flag. 14 years, 71 surgeries, and a former firefighter gets a new face. A week after the Paris attacks, France and much of Europe have become more vigilant. EU countries have imposed stricter border controls, but an assessment of the threat perception leaves one deeply concerned. The French PM, Manuel Valls, says there could be a chemical or biological attack. Earlier, President Hollande said his country was at war and intensified coordinated airstrikes on the ISIS. The G20, which met in Antalya, Turkey, a meeting skipped by Hollande, strongly condemned the Paris attacks. But while calling for all countries to work together, it said the UN should play a central role in the process.
Every country does not have the same interests, nor the same ideas, nor necessarily the same allies. But what's at stake here is putting an end to destroying an army that threatens the entire world, and not only some countries more than others.
French President François Hollande called upon the world community to unite in the fight against Islamic State as the country continued to grapple with aftermath of recent spate of terror attacks. France was quick to respond as at least 129 lives were lost on Friday night last week in Paris when gunmen and suicide bombers hit a concert hall, a major stadium, restaurants and bars almost simultaneously. As the search operations intensified, police raided a flat in a northern Paris suburb, Saint-Denis. Hundreds of commandos and security officers surrounded a flat in the area with their eyes on their main target, Abdelhamid Abaoud, understood to have been the ringleader of last week's attacks. After hours of fierce gun battle, Abdelhamid Abaoud was killed. Another suspect, the female suicide bomber, was also found dead. 8 people were also arrested after the operation. Following the terror strikes, the National Assembly of France approved a 3-month extension to the state of emergency. French Prime Minister said that the country could face the risk of chemical or bacterial warfare in its fight against Islamic militants.
Imagination macabre.
The world community, while expressing solidarity with France, vowed determination to defeat Islamic State militant group. European Union interior ministers discussed tightening of the external borders of the passport-free Schengen area in response to Paris attacks. Last week's attacks were the second major this year after Charlie Hebdo strikes in January. President François Hollande has called for a global coalition to eradicate the Islamic State. The appeal comes as French fighter jets continue raids aimed at Islamic State targets in its stronghold of Raqqa in Syria.
But can this war against terrorism be won by purely military means? That's a question that's on the minds of most analysts. While all countries de-link terrorism from any religion, the distortion of religion by the terrorists forces the battle to be taken into the realm of ideology. And here, the approach being followed, is it adequate?
Months after the deadly terror strikes on satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris in January, France was rattled by another major attack last week, killing more than 125 people. Are these two major attacks in less than a year pointing out at the country's vulnerability to such strikes? French President François Hollande, while vowing to wage war against the Islamic State, admitted inside help in the attacks. What was this inside help? Experts believe answer to these questions lie in the country's struggle to tackle radicalization among the Muslim minority. The recent Paris attacks have again brought the issue into spotlight. According to some estimates, France has lost more people to militancy than any other country in Europe. A French Senate report in April said that at least 1,430 of the 3,000 plus known European jihadis who had then travelled to Syria and Iraq to fight for ISIS were French. The figure was alarming. Another fact that raised alarms was that at least 200 French jihadis who have spent time in ISIS territory reportedly returned to the country. About 370 were arrested upon their return, and 11,000 people were being followed. A number of anti-radicalization campaigns by the French authorities haven't been able to prevent considerable numbers from inclining towards jihad. The fact that France is fighting jihadists worldwide also makes the country a prime target. Over 10,000 French troops are currently deployed abroad. Over 3,000 in Western Africa, 2,000 in Central, and 3,200 in Iraq. The first waves of Islamic militancy in France were linked to the civil war in Algeria, its former colony. In 1994, Algerian militants hijacked an Air France plane with the possible aim of crashing it into Paris. A year later, bombs exploded on public transport in the French capital. Later in the decade, a network of activists linked to Osama bin Laden and other major jihadi figures were active in France. French officials in 2009 or 2010 were confident of their ability to handle any internal threat. This, however, proved nothing but overconfidence.
Brutal, cruel, barbaric. These expressions are now synonymous with the Islamic State, the militant group which now has become the biggest threat to peace, humanity and world order. It has become notorious for its brutality, including mass killings, abductions and beheadings. The group has in the past held more than 20 Western hostages from 12 countries, tortured and executed them. This week it executed a Norwegian and a Chinese.
As the world community scrambles to respond to the war waged by the Islamic State group, questions pile up. Who are they? What do they want? Islamic State traces its origins both to the terror training grounds of Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan and to America's invasion of Iraq in 2003. It struck the international scene in 2014 after capturing large areas of territory in Syria and Iraq. After formally declaring the establishment of a caliphate in June 2014, a state governed in accordance with Islamic law or Sharia, Islamic State called upon Muslims to accept allegiance to its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The group, currently at war against Syria's Bashar al-Assad-led regime, has been conducting large-scale attacks and strikes in Iraq as well. A report in September 2014 claimed that the IS controlled an area similar in size to the UK. In 2015, the Islamic State attempted to increase its area of influence by claiming attacks outside its territory. It claimed the downing of a Russian passenger plane in the Sinai Peninsula that killed all 228 on board. It also claimed responsibility of twin blasts in the Lebanese capital Beirut, killing more than 40. The recent one is the string of attacks in Paris. This militant group is believed to be the world's wealthiest, with the sale of crude oil and refined products, kidnappings and extortions generating millions of dollars as revenue. It employs a sophisticated propaganda machine to produce videos, photos and statements about its activities. These include brutal public executions, helping it attract recruits. A large number of supporters disseminate this material online. The group has recruiters all over the Western world, seeking out new members through social media or known jihadi supporters in various countries. It also targets colleges and high schools under the cover of student groups to find them. IS members are jihadists who follow an extreme interpretation of Islam and consider themselves the only true believers. They adopt extremely brutal ways to terrorize their enemies. Members of this organization have justified their atrocities by citing religion. but Muslims in general have denounced them.
China and Norway expressed shock over the killing of their nationals by Islamic State. Both countries had no reason to doubt the executions made through the ISIS English language Dabiq magazine, which featured graphic photos of two bodies of the hostages. In Mali, the government has declared a 10-day nationwide state of emergency after a jihadist group linked to Al-Qaeda attacked a hotel in the capital Bamako. The attack left at least 21 people dead. Among the killed, there were some foreigners and militants.
A week after French capital Paris was stormed by a series of terror strikes, another crisis hit Malian capital Bamako when armed Islamist extremists barged into a luxury hotel taking 170 people hostage. Friday's assault on the Radisson Blu Hotel was the latest in a series of deadly raids this year on high-profile targets in Mali. Malian, French and US security forces ended the siege after hours of intense operation. Al-Qaeda affiliate the Al-Murabitao group claimed responsibility for the attack. Mali has been torn apart by unrest since the north fell under the control of jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda in 2012. France, the former colonial power in Mali, intervened in the country in January 2013. The militants were largely ousted by French operation, but large swaths of Mali remain lawless and prone to attacks. The UN force in Mali took over responsibility for security in the country from French and African troops in July 2013.
There was more brutality, this time at the hands of Boko Haram in Nigeria. Nearly 50 people were killed in Yola and Kano cities. In Kano, suicide bombers blew themselves up at a mobile phone market in the northern city, while in the northeastern city of Yola, a blast struck a market, killing many, with the total count reaching nearly 50. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, which normally restricts its content to economic issues, was overshadowed by the attacks in France. Leaders of the 21 Asia-Pacific nations issued a joint statement condemning terrorism as the summit wrapped up in Manila, Philippines on Thursday. During the summit, the Philippine President Aquino emphasized the importance of collaborative efforts in ensuring quality growth. Tension over South China Sea also dominated the summit. US President Barack Obama used it to call on China to stop reclaiming lands in disputed waters. On Tuesday, Obama visited an American-donated warship now owned by the Philippines. Obama also reaffirmed Washington's commitment to the defense and security of the Philippines. Meanwhile, China urged the United States to cease hyping up the issue, adding that other countries have no right to make irresponsible remarks. The ASEAN and East Asia summits also take place in the backdrop of strategic alliances and economic cooperation. Myanmar begins the process of transition, with the old requesting the new to respect the current parliament's responsibilities. And in Pakistan, those involved in the gruesome Peshawar attacks are likely to hang.
Economic cooperation, trade and terrorism are the key issues being discussed at the ASEAN summit that is underway in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. The summit of 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations is also attended by the leaders of China, Japan, the Republic of Korea, India, Australia, New Zealand, Russia and the United States. One of the key topics for discussion is the ASEAN Economic Community, or the AEC, which aims for regional economic integration by the end of the year. ASEAN was established in 1967 by the 5 founding members, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore and Thailand. Brunei Darussalam, Vietnam, Laos PDR, Myanmar and Cambodia joined later. The National League for Democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi met with the lower house speaker Shwe Man on Thursday in the capital Naypyidaw. Man urged lawmakers from the ruling party to play fair in the outgoing legislature's remaining debates, which could determine the budget a new opposition-led government will inherit next year. The parliament had resumed on Monday after the historic elections in the country. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has advised the president to reject the mercy pleas of 4 death row terrorists involved in the Peshawar school attack. About 150 people, mostly students, were killed in the country's worst terror assault on the army school in Peshawar in mid-December last year. A military court in August sentenced 7 militants to death for their involvement in the attack. The militants filed for mercy before the president.
After Prime Minister John Key said the current flag is not representative of modern New Zealand, the country is choosing a new flag.
A flag with fern leaf or red peak, black and white or colors of Union Jack retained. To know how the new New Zealand flag will look like, one has to wait until next year, for the country has just started voting in a referendum. Voting opened on Friday as Prime Minister John Key sought to change the flag, saying the current one doesn't represent modern New Zealand. The current flag features Britain's Union Jack and has fluttered over 100 years. Citizens have to choose from 5 designs. 3 prominently feature a fern leaf, 4th features black and white koru, a Maori symbol reminiscent of curled fern font, and the 5th features red, black and blue triangles intersected by a white chevron.
The flag does change, definitely red peak.
There has been criticism too, for 3 designs were too similar or uncreative.
There should be more choices. 3 of those 5 look rather similar.
The first voting ends on 11th December. The winning design will be pitted against the current flag in March next year.
After knowledge that at least one of the Paris attackers came through the refugee route, the US is concerned about welcoming refugees into the United States, especially since the US is a primary target of ISIS threats. In the US presidential race, Republican Bobby Jindal, he's backed out, saying that his time has not yet come, and Brazil claims to have reduced its greenhouse gas emissions substantially.
Calls from US lawmakers for even tighter scrutiny of Syrian refugees fleeing to the United States prompted a sharp rebuke from President Barack Obama. Obama said, attempts to block entry were offensive and contrary to American values. Debate over immigration and national security found new grounds after reports that at least one of the Paris attackers passed through Greece in October. Other Western countries have also begun to question their willingness to admit Syrians. Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal suspended his campaign for the Republican nomination for US presidential polls in November 2016. Jindal has consistently polled on the lower end of the pack of Republicans seeking the party's nomination. According to a report, Brazil's greenhouse gas emissions fell 0.9% in 2014. The report by a network of local environmental organizations also expressed concern that only one sector had shown a decline. The drop last year to 1.558 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent resulted solely because Brazil managed to reduce deforestation after a spike in 2013. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has ordered an investigation into allegations that the US government has spied on state oil company workers for a decade. An Intercept website citing documents it said came from whistleblower Edward Snowden published an article saying that the National Security Agency had spied on top officials at the state oil company.
It's a sport which you may mistake for hockey, but watch carefully and you're likely to spot the difference between hockey and Gallardo. Yes, Gallardo. But it does not end there. The winner of any other sport in the world would envy the best players of this game. Here's why.
Koya Runa and Koya Costco, the 2 teams with 15 players each. Using large sticks, the players hit a 4 kg ball to the opposite end of the field in order to score points. The game looks much like hockey, just the stick and the ball are larger than the usual. This game is Gallardo, an ancient Inca sport. The traditional sport is still being kept alive by these people in Peru's Cusco region. Players thump the sticks on the ground as part of the ancient pre-match ritual, and then the referee sets the game in motion by throwing the ball to the center of the field. The best players get chicha de jora, a traditional alcoholic beverage made from corn. The match is played every year to honor the planting of potato crops. The Incas built the largest empire in the New World between 1400 and 1532 AD and is best known for the city of Machu Picchu.
Here's a love story, and it's traditional, and it's also a dying dance form, part of a 1,300-year-old tradition that the Indonesian government is working hard to preserve.
Malangan mask dance, a part of the ancient Javanese tradition, is now a dying art form. The dance is believed to have come from the 8th century and is the oldest out of more than 3,000 traditional dances that Indonesia has in its archipelago. The theatrical dance known locally as Wayang Topeng Malangan originated from Malang Regency in East Java. It tells the tales of local Javanese folklore from hundreds of years ago. This is the love story of Princess Kandra Kirana of Kediri and Raden Panji, Asmara Bangun, the crown prince of Jingala. The masks, called topeng, are made out of a big log of wood, which is then carved and painted on to represent different characters in the dance. Despite its rich traditions, the art form was only recognized by the government in the 1980s, when it helped build a mask dance gallery. There are various topeng dances and styles in Indonesia. The notable ones are those in Java, Bali, Cirebon and Yogyakarta.
Let's shift gear and catch up with some stories of personalities from the world of glitz. Here's Showbuzz.
Hollywood star Charlie Sheen has revealed he is living with HIV. The former 2.5-man star in an interview said he was diagnosed HIV positive some 4 years ago and had been extorted for more than $10 million to keep the information quiet. Terminally ill Star Wars fan who was given an early screening of the franchise's latest installment died days after being granted the wish. Daniel Fleetwood, who was given 2 months to live in July, received a special screening of Star Wars The Force Awakens last Thursday. Two-time Oscar winner Cate Blanchett has been honored for her film work at a glittery gala at New York's Museum of Modern Art. Her latest film, Carol, premiered in New York on Monday. The film had got a gala screening at this year's London Film Festival. Eddie Redmayne, who won Oscar for playing Stephen Hawking, just might have a second shot at the awards, this time for playing transgender pioneer Lily Elbe in The Danish Girl. Lily was a painter in 1920s Rotterdam who was the first known person to undergo transgender surgery.
The costs of dangerous professions are immense. You may save lives and get burnt in the process. Here's the inspiring story of Patrick Hardison, a volunteer firefighter.
Patrick Hardison was just 27, with a job and a beautiful family, settled in a quaint small town of Senatobia in northwest Mississippi. His life was just like any other ordinary man until that fateful day. It was 5th September and the year was 2001. Hardison, a volunteer firefighter, got a fire alert on his pager. The team rushed to the spot. Flames were shooting through the roof. Believing that a woman was inside, Hardison and 3 others went in. Finding no one, the team managed its way out. But as Hardison retreated, the ceiling collapsed on him. A story of bravery soon turned tragic. Hardison jumped out. His face was on fire. As they doused the flame and rushed him to hospital, the damage had been done. The mask had melted, the face disfigured beyond recognition. What followed was 14 years of struggle, 71 surgeries, a fight with self, and a faceless survival. Hardison's story made to the mainstream media, for the man received the most extensive face transplant ever. Hope came for Hardison this August when doctors found a suitable match for the transplant. The donor was 26-year-old David Roadborg, a bike mechanic from Brooklyn. Roadborg was left in a vegetative state by a cycling accident. Roadborg's mother readily agreed for the transplant, noting her son was an unexpected gift after she had been told she could never conceive. Roadborg's heart, kidney, liver and eyes were also donated to patients waiting for eligible transplants. Hardison received a full scalp and face transplant, including ears, nose, lips and eyelids. The transplant has given Hardison a new lease of life. This story is not just that of bravery and struggle. It is a story of hope and optimism, of empathy and compassion.
This brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do send us your feedback. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldconnect.ddnews@gmail.com. We are overwhelmed with the response of our viewers. You can also follow us on Facebook. Connect with us by clicking on the link, which is right there on your TV screens. But before we wrap up, we leave you with images of cities expressing their solidarity with France.